I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. I'd like to welcome you to our May 24th, Tuesday meeting of the Langley School Board of Education. And before we get going here, I just got a few things I'd like to go through. First of all, the audiovisual recording webcasting of a regular board meeting tonight. Those in attendance were informed that as per policy number 7, regular and special meetings of the board may be streamed live, archived, and accessed online. The board reserves as its sole discretion via motion at any meeting the right to not stream live or archive a meeting or a portion of a meeting. Further, the board reserves the right to edit or any recorded portion of a meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order tonight. It is now 7 o'clock. Beginning, and we'll start with a traditional welcome. I would like to acknowledge that the Langley School District is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of Langley, Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nations. We gather here tonight in an understanding of the importance of Yayastal, Skekoyas, working together, and Natsamat, united ourselves with one mind and one heart to ensure that we support and inspire all learners to reach their full potential. This Friday, May 27th, will mark the 1-year anniversary of the affirmation of remains of more than 215 children buried at the site of the former Kamloops Indian Residential School. This information started similar work in many other nations, resulting in the uncovering of thousands of unmarked graves, including 160 at the former Cooper Island Industrial School site and 93 at St. Joseph's Mission in Williams Lake. Please join us for a moment of silence as we honor the survivors, their families, and those who did not return. Thank you very much. Also tonight, our hearts go out to the community of Uvalde, Texas, and all the families, students, and staff affected by today's tragedy at Robb Elementary School. Now I'd like to introduce our guests that are here tonight and the staff that are present. First of all, I'd like to start out with our guests. We have Mike Pugh is here, and he's our district principal of Aboriginal Education. Along with him is Cheryl Gabriel, and I'd like to welcome her as well, and she's the Kwantlen First Nations Education Coordinator. As well, we have Aya Hare, she's the district vice principal. Magdi Gabriel, district vice principal, Wellness and Diversity. Sam Maraka, district principal, LEC, and Corporal Craig Van Herk with the RCMP will be here later on as well. Tonight, some of the partner groups that are here with us. Human Anasori is not here, but I expect him, from CUPE 1851 president. Tanya Kerr is here, LTA president. Ellen Bornowski, LTA vice president. Jeremy Linden, LP VPA president. And also Jennifer Johnson, CUPE 1260 president. Staff present tonight, we have Vincent Montefrio, he's a technical support specialist 1, Dale Vo, technical support specialist 3, and Paul Bobeo is the technical support specialist 1. Judy Swanson is our executive assistant tonight. Along with her, we have Joanne Abshar, our communications manager, Marcelo Moino, the assistant superintendent, Lisa Lanchbury, assistant superintendent, Shin Chan, assistant secretary treasurer, Barry Bunyan, assistant superintendent, Woody Bradford, deputy superintendent, Brian Isley, our secretary treasurer, and also tonight we have Mel Gill, our superintendent as well, that's with us. Trustees that are with us tonight, We have our youngest trustee, Mr. Charlie Fox. Marty Wilson is our vice chair. Tony Ward, Suzanne Perot, Shelley Coburn, David Todd, and my name is Rod Ross, and I'm the board chair. Thank you. Okay, on with tonight's meeting. I would like to have a report from in camera. The vice chair will report on these. Would you like to go through that now?
Great. Thank you. At tonight's in-camera meeting, we discussed personnel, and I would also like to report out the appointment of our auditors, KPMG, for 3 years.
Thank you very much. Okay. Now we'll move on to the number 4, which is the consent agenda. I need a mover and seconder that the Board of Education drops the consent agenda items as provided. Okay, moved by David Todd and seconded by Charlie Fox. Thank you. All those in favor of the motion, and it's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. On to number 5, consideration of tonight's agenda. I need a mover that the agenda be approved as presented. Can I get a mover? Okay, the vice chair, thank you very much, and seconded by Shelley Coburn. Thank you very much. All those in favor, please. And it passes unanimously as well. Thank you. On to number 6, Secretary Treasurer's report. 6.1, 2022-2023 annual report, budget bylaw, first and second reading. Would you like to lead us off on this, Secretary Treasurer, please?
Thank you, Chair Ross. Before I get started tonight, there's a lot of information to share with trustees that you've seen in finance facility meetings, but new to the public. Wanted to take a moment to thank Assistant Secretary Shin Chand and his team for all the work that they've done in preparing the budget for the district for the next coming school year, and just wanted to thank him for the work that he's put in, countless hours, evenings and weekends, trying to get this ready for tonight. So thank you to him and his team.
Thank you very much. So I need a mover and a second.
Sorry.
Are you gonna?
I'll go through it first, and then we'll do that if you don't mind. Just a refresher for people, the legislative authority boards are required to annually adopt a budget before June 30th, as per the ministry requirements. And it has to be in the format that is specified by the School Act and by the minister, which is currently the PSAB format, which is a bit of a hard format to understand for a lot of people in the way it is drafted out. It's broken down into a bunch of sections. The first 2 are what they call the statements, and they're the consolidation of all the various funds that the boards need to pass budgets for. And then the schedules are the actual breakdown of the individual funds. The largest one, and where we'll spend most of our time tonight, the operating budget, which is the Schedule 2s. Schedule 3 are the special purpose funds, and Schedule 4 the capital funds, all of which get rolled up into, like I've mentioned before, the statements that are what the bylaw is passed for. Just before we get into it, a couple of the higher level assumptions that went into the budget for this upcoming school year. Our enrollment is increasing 353.57 FTE to just over 22,000 students. ISP projected to be 860 students, slightly down from the current school year, and hopefully that number will improve as we get farther and closer. Summer session, still planning that at about 70% of pre-COVID numbers. There's an update tonight on that, and we'll probably exceed those numbers, but had put those in there. We put in benefit changes for dental and extended health, CPP, and group life increases. This budget does not include any increases for collective agreements for teachers and QP staff, as those agreements come due at the end of the school year. As in past years, the district is assuming that once those agreements are signed, that there'll also be funding for the ministry to cover those. And those would be added to an amended budget once those are known. Estimated increases for exempt and admin, and then all the year impacts of positions that started partway through last year and removal of one-time items. And trustees will recall that there are a fair number of one-time items that are coming out of the budget with the enrollment growth that we had. last year. That was far beyond what we've seen in any other year. We used a lot of those funds for one-time items to help right-size our deficit budget structure, which you'll see we've made progress in getting that closer to a balanced budget. So total revenues, which is part of the bylaw tonight, composing of the three funds as mentioned. On the revenue side, we're just over $290 million as a district. You can see the biggest piece of that is in our operating fund at just under $235 million. And our largest funding source, obviously, is the Ministry of Education at just about $255 million. On the expense side, you can see we're at just below $292 million, with the majority of that obviously being in our operating fund, and instruction being the highest category of our budget at just over $240 million. The package that's in your package on the budget has the bylaw amount. This is what's on the screen right now, broken down by funds. So once I'm done presenting and answering questions, the hope from staff is that we will be approving the bylaw for just over $294 million, doing the first and second readings tonight and the third reading in our meeting in June. As mentioned, the operating fund is where we'll spend most of our time. So this is a slide on the changes in our operating revenue. The bulk of which are in two categories, being the operating grant and tuition. The others have been pretty static, with just minor changes. And I have slides on both of those. Before we go into the operating grant from the ministry, wanted to point out that this year there were no changes to the per student funding rates provided from the ministry. So the funding was status quo. From the ministry. There were no increases for contracts because there were none, but there was also no changes for inflationary pressures, which we'll talk as we get further into the evening. You can see the change in the operating grant is just over $4 million. The largest piece of that being just under $2.7 million on enrollment due to the mentioned anticipated growth in students, followed by unique student needs going up just under $1.2 million. There was one category where there were some additional funds put in the ministry, what they call supplements. Those are geographic factors, climate factors, those kind of things. There was a little bit of funding added to that pocket for those types of things. Our share of that was $198,000. And so, like I said, these changes total up to just over $4 million. On the international, we did reduce those numbers slightly. We did benefit last year for programs that weren't run in other jurisdictions across Canada that are now once again running their programs now that we're coming out of COVID. So that it will have a slight impact on our program. Hopefully we'll be able to exceed those numbers, but that was the estimate for now. We also every year have cancellations in international programs where policy dictates that we get to keep a percentage of that. So there was $303,000 in the amended budget for those cancellations that obviously have to be removed in the preliminary budget. On the expense side, and I have slides for all of these, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one. You can see our total expenses went up by $1.7 million. But if you look at the salary and benefits, we're up 3.9 and down by 2.2 million in supplies. As mentioned, we spent a lot of funds in our amended budget on one-time items, which is representative in our supplies and services. On the teacher side, we have salary increments as teachers move through the steps, just over $1.1 million anticipated for the upcoming school year. We had in our amended budget average teacher cost savings this year of $936,000, which is higher than it has been the last number of years. A lot of that due to the extreme number of students that came in, a lot of the hiring that we had to do and adding teachers in the amended budget due to the larger enrollment. We are planning 8 more divisions at elementary and middle, 8 FTE at secondary, 4 FTE for resource teachers. The impact of some of our late starts is about $255,000 that had been put into those funds. Some of those are offset by the decline in supplies. LA time of 2.1, ELL of 0.5, and Indigenous teacher of 0.5. The principal and vice principals, mentioned earlier the wage increases, so that's the largest change there. We had a learning loss fund that was created from holdback funding that was stipulated that was to be used for learning loss. Part of that was a 0.8 vice principal that was there, and that position will no longer be there because that was one-time funding. And adding a district principal human resources when we made a bunch of changes up here. There's savings centrally here to offset most of those, but they're in a bunch of various places. And there is also the possibility of a grant coming to offset potentially the district principal of early learnings, which would also offset some more of those costs as well. On the SEA side, we have built a contingency this year of $405,000. Historically, we've always gone and taken all the staff and pushed it out at the beginning of September, and then as new students arrive, we don't have necessarily funds to do that. So we've put aside $405,000 plus benefits on the benefit side to total just over $500,000 to allow our learning support services department to build a plan to roll out those supports as students come and are added to the district. So those will work out to, if it was at September, just about 12.5 FT, but it'll probably work out to be more than that because of the timing that those funds will be rolled out over the year. There's one more day of pay due to just the way the calendar falls this year. Late starts impact, and then items that we had used in one-time funds with some term SEAs positions that we had put in the amended budget. So those terms have come out, and then we will use some of that SEA contingency. The support staff, there was some funds that we'd put aside from surplus money for the custodial, to have the custodial start at noon, and some floater custodial staff that we had done as an add-on to the requirements for the COVID for this school year that we maintain throughout the school year as a bit of a transition back to normal. We've added a custodial for the number of classes that we've had to add on the Willoughby slope. And then there's some annualized impact of some positions at LEC. Once again, the impact on the extra day, and then add back a lot of maintenance, late start and vacancies that we had to put into the amended budget. On the other professionals, it's the remainder of the wage increases that I spoke to earlier. The annualized impact of budget for the assistant facilities director, apparently not easy for me to say. Adding a homestay manager for the international program. We had to remove some positions in ISP when the numbers had declined, and now as that program builds back up, we've been adding back to those departments to get them back to where they were, and some just other salary adjustments that needed to be made. Substitutes. It's always a hard one to understand the drop when you go from amended to preliminary. The big difference is the vacancies. We don't budget vacancies at the preliminary budget. We assume all positions will be filled. So those are reflected. Also, the other district leaves, a large portion of that was also the funds that were used for the learning loss. So that was one-time funding that we'd put in TTOC time for that learning loss fund. And some of the late starts for custodial and SEs and those types of positions as well. Bit of a busy slide, but we were able to get our supply changes onto one. So I won't necessarily touch on all of them, but a fair number of them. With the ISP program coming back, it required a lot of new students, which drove higher commission rates. Also, we put aside $71,000 for a BACAO anti-racism training that the district will be undertaking this upcoming year. We removed one of our leases that came up on technology for $472,000. That amount has thus been moved over to the capital side. The district has switched from a leasing strategy to a buy and own strategy. And we have another year past this upcoming year left in leases. There's a small amount, I think about of $150,000 left that will carry on for one more year past this. And then we will have built a budget in IT that will sustain the model and be able to do the refresh cycle out of the operating budget with us owning the equipment. Consulting costs, we did a bunch of studies for Brookswood Fernridge Development Plan, the Langley Secondary PDR study, and a few other studies that were done. Those have been removed. We've added $181,000 to reflect the NGN. That's the network cost that the ministry charges us for the Wi-Fi into all of our facilities, as those costs have gone up. And then, like I mentioned, a bunch of things that were one-time items. There's a whole list of them here now. Things that hadn't received the prior June that we had to budget in the amended budget for $115,000. School budgets because of carry forwards, late starts, and one-time items, $786,000. Furniture and equipment, $166,000. With elementary level literacy books of $326,000. Athletic equipment, $200,000. Betty Gilbert, Aldergrove Initiatives, $318,000. Indigenous educational culture presenters, surplus $170,000. All of these are things that we used to benefit our schools and used as one-time items in our amended budget that helped us to right-size our budget structure to a great deal. So also $260,000 in utilities, especially as we are going back to using our facilities for rentals and more hours than they have been the last 2 years. That comes with a higher utility cost. From the local capital, these are capital items in nature. The first line there, the 1.8 million, is where I mentioned that those lease funds were transferred to. Our director of IT basically has a plan for a 5-year cycle of replacing all the equipment and needs a $2 million budget. So once that next year comes off the lease of the $150,000, we will be able to have a maintainable IT budget. Always will be supplemented probably with one-time funds and surplus money, but we now have a budget structure that can maintain the refresh of equipment in the district. Same with the fleet. We now have a $500,000 budget in there that we've been able to maintain to replace our aging fleet. And we still have a ways to go there, and probably will need some one-time funds over the next couple of years to catch up. But the run rate that the facilities department feels they need on an ongoing basis once we catch up is a $500,000. So we have hit that amount. It's just now we have to get the older ones replaced. All this ends up with the district being in a deficit plan of $770,000, which is a substantial improvement from the $7.1 million amended budget. A lot of that was one-time items that we'd put into the budget and used from surplus funds. If trustees recall, the structural deficit when we did the preliminary budget was just under $3.3 million. So we have made significant strides towards a balanced budget. How are we going to pay for this deficit? Out of the accumulated surplus, trustees will recall that we had set aside $2.5 million to balance future budgets. So we will be requesting that at the June meeting, before you read the third reading, that you would appropriate that and use that to balance this budget. It would leave us $1.7 million left in that fund to balance subsequent years' budgets, which I will talk further when we talk about the 3-year budget forecast. Special purpose funds. So these are funds that are restricted in nature with requirements of having to be paid back if they're not used for specific purposes. A lot of these are annual amounts or one-time amounts. You can see that there's not a lot of changes at the top section there, the Learning Improvement Fund, the Ready, Set, Learn, and the languages funds. Those are just removing surplus amounts from previous years, getting them back to their normal funding rate. On the Classroom Enhancement Fund, I have a separate slide for that, so I'll address that there. And then we have a bunch of one-time grants that were for just the one calendar year. You'll see at the bottom there the provincial safe return to schools grants of $496,000, which was for the COVID startup, and then also the federal safe return school class fund, which was a carryover from the previous year for items that didn't actually arrive last June, that they allowed us to keep the funds for when those things did arrive and have arrived since. The Classroom Enhancement Fund, this year they've done the funding a little differently. If you recall, in past years, they would take the teacher cost and fund 90% of it. This year, they're actually funding 100% of the amount that they funded us in the current year. They still do a report required from us at the end of September as to what our actual needs are for the 22-23 year, but they pre-fund us based on what they funded us for the current year. With the exception of remedy, obviously, it's an unknown at this point in time. And basically, once we file that remedy, they do fund that in its entirety. New this year is a 3-year budget forecast. This comes out of some of the work that was done by provincially from the Financial Health Working Group and from the ministry, trying to get a 3-year budget forecast to help us show the public and the trustees for planning and goal setting as to what is on the horizon. Part of that was a need for a policy or admin procedure, which the district does have in admin procedure 500. And this is the first year that we've done the 3-year forecasting. I just wanted to point out that it is a extremely high level plan. It is a very conservative plan on the cost side. It basically just takes into account anticipated enrollment growth and the teachers and support staff that need to do it. This is not adding any programs. It's not adding any big changes. It does have a very, very conservative 2% inflation factor, just to put in a number at this point, with inflation changing on a day-by-day basis. And what it does have is some portable needs. With the incredible growth that this district is having and the delays that we've had in schools, we've put in some portables, which probably is conservative in the number that will be needed in the next couple of years, with year 2 of the budget being 10 portables required and 13 required in the following year. Part of that, we do have some benefit premium holidays that we can take as one-time funds. The plan is to use some of that money to use to offset some of these cost pressures. So what does that mean? Like I said, the trustees have seen this, and I'm not going to go into great detail, but it does show at the bottom the current budget year of what we've just gone through of a deficit of $770,000. But you could see that that starts to grow to $2.5 million and $1.9 million over the next couple of years, just with status quo operations, except for adding basically staffing for incremental students. A lot of that is teacher increments, raises for exempt and min that aren't funded. So those are costs that we need to find out of our budget, and also the impact of our need to buy portables over the next couple of years. So how we balance those budgets? Well, this year we're budgeting the $770,000. We can use that $2.5 million to do that. Of that, we would need another 1.5 of it the following year, plus, you know, the $500,000 that we had set aside for portables and some $500,000 for starting the projector replacement. It's in 24-25 when we start to run out of surplus funds. As you can see, we only have $230,000 left of that balance to budget. We will use the 107 for infrastructure, but that leaves us short just under $1.6 million. And if there were no changes to the forecast or additional funds, different structures or surpluses that we get from the years that come into that, we would have to either cut costs or use our unrestricted surplus to the tune of $1.6 million. Based on those uses of surplus, you can see what happens to the accumulated surplus over the 3-year planning horizon. It basically depletes us of all of our surplus funds. The school generated funds, 2.6, is not for the board to touch. Those are the funds that are in school bank accounts, and those are for the schools to do with, as they are all set up for them. It does leave us $283,000 in a COVID contingency. I do not think that that'll be there 3 years from now. It's just, I don't know what we will be using it for. Most likely it'll be used in the amended budget process as we go through and find out what the requirements are for next fall. But since we didn't know what it was for, we just kind of left that there instead of guessing at this point in time. We would have $320,000 as a contribution to capital, which is a requirement going forward for districts. So we've started to have some money set aside there. And you can see our unrestricted surplus going down to $2.4 million. Part of our restricted surplus policy does dictate that if it goes below the 1.5% contingency, which the board wants to maintain, it would trigger the board needing to create strategies to replace that surplus over subsequent budgeting periods to restore that contingency. So next steps after tonight, hopefully we will have the first and second reading. We will have our budget open house in person instead of the budget virtual open house that we've had to do the last couple of years on June 2nd, with the final reading on June 21st at the public board meeting. As mentioned, we would need a motion also to restrict some funds from the accumulated surplus. I did want to mention, I forgot to do so earlier, part of the process that we did this year was a online budget survey, which we had extremely high response to, far higher than even our optimistic communications manager thought, even doubled what she thought. So those results can be found on our district website. If you're looking for the link, it was in the letter that came from our superintendent on Friday. There's a link in his letter there. So if you participated or just were curious to see what those results were, we invite you to take a look at those. So just a reminder before I hand it back to Chair Ross, so the annual bylaw amount would be the $294,199,666. That, I'll answer any questions.
And thank you very much for the outstanding presentation. And I do think that the board would be in agreement that we have the best secretary treasurer in the province. So you're here on that. I need to get the mover and seconder for this. Can I get mover for the budget bylaw is going to be Shelley Coburn. Seconder, David Todd. Thank you very much. The District number 35 Langley annual bylaw for fiscal 2022/2023 in the amount of $294,199,666 be given first reading. All those in, let's have questions first. Sorry, go ahead. Questions, and I have a whole list of people. So Shelley Coburn, you're first, and then I've got a couple others. Go ahead, Shelley.
Thank you, Chair Ross. Yeah, thank you, Secretary Treasurer Isley. Excellent report. So I have lots of questions in general, but I just want to. So I noticed that not only is there no change in per pupil funding, that there's been nothing, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear. So despite, according to their own reporting on a government BC consumer price increase, things like gas have increased 48.7% in a year, piped gas 18%, electricity 5.5%, all things that we need to run. So we're expected to balance the budget, and I'm just wondering where in your budget messaging from the ministry or the government of where hyperinflation is being accounted for. And if we're expected to balance a budget when we're a growing district with no inflation represented, we need portables. Don't forget those sick days. I'm just wondering how we're going to do that when inflation hasn't been accounted for in our budget.
Yeah, so there has been no funding for the hyperinflation that has occurred over the last number of months. It's a concern that has been raised to the ministry. At this point, there has been no confirmation on funding or anything that would be coming to address that. It is a concern. We built this budget without the hyperinflation, but we did kind of just do a bit of a quick check on custodial supplies. It was one that was fairly easy and quick to do. That alone is probably $80,000 to $100,000 in inflation cost to our budget. And we kind of stopped at that point because by the time we actually get to amended budget, any work that we do on inflation costs are pretty moot and pointless. So we will have to consider inflation once we get into the amended budget process. You also mentioned the 5 sick days for people that aren't covered by that under collective agreement. Really have no idea what the potential, well, I know what the potential is. If everyone that potentially is eligible is about $900,000. But what that really turns out to and what we experience with that, I have no idea. We just need some time to see what that happens. That's another cost pressure that happens. That's going to have to be considered when we look at the amended budget. There are also costs that every year that aren't covered. Raises for admin and exams, teacher increments, all those types of things are costs that districts have to absorb. We've been semi-lucky with the enrollment growth. It does offset some of those things. But I think you'll see there's been a lot of districts across the province talking about some pretty severe cuts that they're having to make this year because of costs. And you've seen what's happened with our 3-year budget over time without adding programming, even in a growing district. I think I addressed all of them. If not, please let me know.
So thank you. I'm so glad I'm getting a museum. Enrollment does have its challenges, for example, portables, which we need. So my biggest, just the biggest price challenge for me would be the cost of fuel. So we need fuel to operate our schools. We need fuel for our buses. We need fuels for our facilities. And so not that I expect you to know offhand what we spend on gas a year as a district, but gas alone was increased 38.7%. So roughly, what would an increase of 38.7% do to our overall fuel budget?
That number I don't have off the top of my head. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. You're good, but thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I have a couple others that would like to speak. So Suzanne Pro is next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Ross. Through the chair to the Secretary Treasurer, thank you again for an incredible amount of work that none of us could pull off, or dissect, or deliver. So thank you for that and your patience in that. I have several questions, but for the sake of time, I'm going to narrow it down to an easy one for you. A very easy one. In one of your presentation slides, you have a line that says pay equity and it says 551,000, etc. Can you explain so everybody understands what that means? Because I don't think people know what that means versus what they think it means.
I'd have to find that slide.
I thought you said it was an easy question.
I thought it was.
Oh, that one. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. The equity of opportunity supplement. That's what you mean. Yeah. So that is a fund that the ministry has set up to help districts with unique needs for students. So it's under the same categories as our level 1, 2, and 3 funding, ELL, Indigenous, and some adult education funding.
Thank you. On to Charlie Fox, please. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair Russ. And his staff for the work they've done. I think it's imperative that we as a, understand that of the 2,100 responses that we got on the budget, was it 2,100? 2,100 individuals in our community responded. Thank you for that. And it did provide us as trustees, ourselves, as with some excellent information, which has been incorporated. Thank you to the staff for that. So that's appreciated. I'm going to say my little intro first. I will vote for this in first and second reading, but I have a great deal of trouble voting for this budget. I hate the word deficit. I don't like it in my household. I don't like it in when I'm working with students. I came onto the board for student success, student achievement, and a variety of other issues such as that. And I don't see a deficit aligning with any of those particular personal goals that I have. But having said that, questions. Do we have to pay carbon offset costs as part of our budget? Is that just built in?
We do, but right now we get a rebate subsequent year after on it. For how long that will continue, I do not know.
Okay. Another one, you said one-time gang grants was being removed. Could you explain that line item?
I might have to call on Assistant Secretary Shin Chan, but it was a one-time fund that we had for a program, I believe.
It was just a one-time?
Yeah.
Okay. Was that the same as the mental health in schools grant?
The mental health in schools grant we've received the last couple of years, but there's been no confirmation of an amount for next year. We're hopeful that there'll be another one.
Okay, thank you. I'll end it there. I've got a lot. I'm very concerned about this, and particularly concerned about the 3-year extrapolation of budgets, looking at almost a $3 million deficit.
Thank you. And now Monty Wilson, go ahead. No, actually, he's actually at the end. You're okay.
Thanks. Thanks, David, for giving me your spot, I think. I saw you signaling earlier. I thought he saw you. Okay, yeah, I have several concerns with the deficit, and just mainly my concerns are the state of where we are with the ministry and the funding and the lack of funding for the things you mentioned, the admin raises, the teacher salary grids, inflation. Like, I do not understand this concept. I don't know how we can't be funded for inflation when everything we're purchasing has gone up. And I guess one of the main things is what I've also been hearing, just with the state of our government mandate for bargaining right now as well. They obviously have not thought about inflation in that realm either. So there are just several areas where I just feel like we are falling down, and I do want people to know that since we have joined Metro, which has been a step for us in this term, that we did bring this forward to Metro, and we are trying to work more closely with the BCSTA on doing things at a broader level and not just our district, because obviously as everybody's district is going through these things, we can realize that something has got to change. We can't just keep doing more with less, and the same for our employees and everybody here. So yeah, just grave concern as well. And I hope that the ministry is listening and will make some changes. Thank you.
And thank you very much. And now on to David Dodd. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to do a sandwich. Kudos, first off, for preparing a nearly balanced budget. So near that we can almost see it, and that was the plan, and thanks to last year's like incredible numbers that actually gave us you know, that kind of almost like moonshot to get there. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the work you've done. I think being fairly conservative in the past with enrollment figures has gotten us to a good, well, not a great, but a decent level of financial stability. And financial stability leads to educational stability in our district. Here's the hard part, because people, you know, I don't want to piggyback on what Trustee Coburn said, but just on natural gas and electricity, I believe you, in the budget, I saw a $200,000 increase, and that's to the fuels that, you know, run our schools. And that doesn't even mention petroleum. And that there is my big concern, as was already evidenced, that I think that we will see incredible, like we're talking 30 to 40% increase in our maintenance fleet and possibly other ones. So concern, and just the unknown world of natural gas futures right now is something. So you may want to talk about that. The other one was the 5 days, the balanced budget, and the last part is thank you for being so prudent about things like international students, like those, because it's easy to go to like a very optimistic tone, but in 2 years' time, we're looking for money and we're in a much worse place. And, you know, we've talked about it before as a board, we have to make our voices heard, that inflation right now is unlike anything in the last 31 years. So if the consumer price index is 7%, that's a 7% difference in a budget of 294 million. That won't be doable.
Thank you, Trustee Todd. I have one question, and then we've got a second opportunity for second questions if anyone has one. My only comment is you mentioned, Secretary Treasurer, that you're moving with a new policy of moving from leasing to purchasing. Can you, I always like the idea of leasing. I thought that was a prudent thing to do. So you've changed that model. Can you explain that to?
We went to a leasing model because at the time we didn't have the ability to build a model over time where we could have predictable budgeting. It was, I need, you know, $2 million for teacher laptops this year, and, you know, another $3 million for Wi-Fi infrastructure. So our IT director that joined us a few years back has been working to build a model where he has a budget planned over a 5-year horizon so that he can make that similar thing work. The nice thing about that is it allows us to keep the devices past the lease period. And so it allows us a little more flexibility. Some of those devices are still usable in other aspects, so we can use them in different ways in the system, supporting children, and even providing some devices for children with needs at home that can't have them. So it's provided us a lot of benefits that we weren't able to do prior.
Thank you very much. I know that Suzanne Pro, Trustee Pro, you had a second question?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair to Superintendent, departure from numbers. Secretary Treasurer mentioned that we'll be engaging in anti-racism training for staff. Will we be doing onboarding for our staff with anti-racism as we're hiring them to prepare them to come into the workforce?
Thank you for the question. First of all, the training that's going to be provided is actually, it's more of an audit of the district. And so the opportunity will be about where are we doing good work and where are some areas that we can improve. And likely that one of those pieces will be on the onboarding processes that we have in place. So I appreciate the question, but looking forward to going through that audit with the team. I've spoken to several districts that have worked with this particular firm, and all of them have indicated that there's been specific recommendations that have been provided that would help close that gap that we need to close in our district.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions at this time, I think we'll call the question, if I could, that the school district number 35 Langley annual budget bylaw for fiscal 2022/2023 in the amount of $294,199,666 be given first reading. All those in favor, please. And it's carried unanimously. Thank you. And now we've got a second opportunity for the same motion. I need a mover and a seconder that the school district number 35 Langley annual budget bylaw for fiscal year 2022/2023 in the amount of $294,199,666 be given second reading. I need a mover and a seconder. So David, Tony Ward, pardon me, and sorry, Tony Wood and Suzanne Perot. Thank you. All right, all those in favor? And it's carried unanimously as well. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Secretary Treasurer. On to the superintendent's report. Go ahead, 7.1, district flags. Superintendent, please.
Thank you, Chair Ross. It's my great pleasure to introduce District Principal of our Aboriginal Department, Michael Pugh, and Cheryl Gabriel from Kwantlen. Appreciate your presence this evening. The district, as most are aware, currently our flags are still flying at half-mast. And in October, trustees put together a motion for staff to go back to Yaya to get further guidance. That work has been done, and we are lucky enough to have Cheryl and Michael here this evening to help report back on the good work that's been done, the time that's been spent, and to help us at our next steps with our flags. So thank you again.
Am I speaking? I think that's on now. Oh, there it is. ASEAN, Inasia, Inasialhua, Itsepuelio, Mike Quaniskwi, Tanitanak, Langley, Ia Tanatamo, Ashquantlanath, Shkatsiath, Shmefquiath, A Semiamath Masteo, Hiluk Tunashwello and Quisneets Quisnala Tanawale, Heitzepka. And I will also say, Heichka to Sesmalot, my teacher, who spent so much time with me to understand that the importance of starting with language, and that language grounds us. It's connected to the land, and how important it is that we connect the work we do today to the land as we bring guidance from the leadership of the four nations. And so essentially what I said was, hello, friends, respected ones, elders, family. How are you doing today? My name is Mike and I'm from Langley, and we are on the lands of the Kwantlen, Katzie, Matsqui, and Semiahmoo people. And what I always love is the last part, Hiluk Tanashwelo and Quisneets Quisnala Tanawale, which, as Fern says, doesn't have a literal translation, other than it just gives us great feeling to be here and to see you all. And so today, I hope connecting to the language of the land that we have here in the building, Yayastal, Skekoyois, working together, Natsamat, Latsamat, to one heart, one mind. And this is really kind of the work that we have undertaken. And so I framed tonight's presentation through the First People's Principles of Learning, that ultimately learning does support the well-being of the self, the family, the community, the land, the spirits, and the ancestors. That we recognize within it the role of Indigenous knowledge, and that learning involves patience and time. And this has been a journey. I also look to, from the BCTF, the Aboriginal ways of knowing and being. That learning honors our ancestors, elders, knowledge keepers, and descendants. It respects and embraces ceremony, protocol, and teachings. And that important teachings emerge through stories. And learning involves developing relationships, respecting distinct cultures, and honoring the perspective of others in the communities. And these two pieces come together to really describe the journey that we've been on. And of course, as a district, we have our commitment to reconciliation. And this is not something we take lightly, and it is not something that we put words to. It was the chief of Tecumlip's Teshwetmik yesterday who talked about, she believes reconciliation can happen, but reconciliation comes through relationship. And that is the first and foremost place of where we start. And so we shared today about the relationship and the work we've done in the past few months. So let's go back. I remember exactly where I sat on May 26th, 2021, when Mike Morgan sent me a text with an article. Sorry, May 27th. And he said, I think you need to read this. This is going to be something big, and it's going to create a lot of work for us to do within how we support staff, how we support the community. And it was the finding from Tecumseh to Schwetmik of 215 children buried in unmarked graves. And I think of my own family when I do, and the others, what that must have been like. And it was on May 31st, 2021, that the BC government, in response, as a way to honor the 215, to honor the families, to honor those that did not return, stated that all flags at provincial buildings will be lowered to half-mast for a period to be determined. As it turned out, as our country, our communities wrestled with the news, the determination was that July 12th, 2021 would be a day to return those flags to full staff. And that was the directive that came from the provincial government. And it was the Board of Education here that made the decision and passed the motion that the flags would remain at half-mast indefinitely. And so following that, through September, there were further conversations. And ultimately in October, it led to the Board of Education passing the motion that they asked for the representative from the board for Yayastal and for staff to take this issue to Yayastal, to the table, for consultation and for guidance. And so at our November meeting, in the midst of all the flooding, because what else could possibly happen that year, we met together and talked about a process of what should happen. And so to share that piece with you, Cheryl's here to speak tonight.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to share something probably a little bit different than I shared with you earlier, but what I'm going to say is the same. We don't flow in the water the same way. What comes on the water will be a new leaf, a new piece of driftwood, a log, a root. But they come from the mountains. My family on my mom's side, Shaken, off of highway number 8, the flood left them stranded in their community for a few weeks. I think a helicopter could come in to get them. The road on number 8 had washed into the water. Along with that was my grandfather's bridge, named after him, Chief Anthony Joe, and his sign from his bridge ended up near Patella or Portland Bridge. Somebody found it. And my uncle lost 29 horses and land. And when we think about what they went through, not only as residential school survivors on my mom's side, having been driven by horse and wagon to Lytton, where St. George's residential school
I don't know if it's still there or not, but the fire that went through Lytton. And the irony of a flood, the announcement, the flood, the fires, it felt like Creator wanted to say something out loud. Mother Earth wanted to say something out loud. And I believe it's all this. How do we stand together in devastation and rebuild a process in even voicing our opinions, but also making sure with our process that we went from November on till just last week with our final discussion with Semiahmo's Chief Harley Chapel. And in January was our meeting with Chief Grace's counselor, David Kensworthy, and also our counselor, Tumia Knott, from my sister, Marilyn, and Chief Alice McKay from Matsqui. We learned along the way because the 215 was like the flood, like the fire, like not finding a way home. And I shared earlier with the in-camera people that my aunties, both my aunties from my father's side of the family, they didn't come home. And I further say, when they didn't come home, my grandfather went to go pick them up in the summertime to bring them home. And was told there that they had passed away in the winter. We don't know if that's the truth or not, because there's nothing to substantiate it. So I was thinking the 5 years ago, because my auntie Barbara is in her late 80s, almost 90, she does little voices with Hulkamalum language. And what Sesmilot taught Mike so eloquently, you brought that forward, the language of the land. We have two dialects in Kwantlen. From Kwantlen to Matsqui, all the way up to the 11 Nations, all the way to Boston Bar is Hulkamalum. From Kwantlen to Musqueam, is the Hulkamalum. And from Musqueam to the island, as far as Nanaimo, Nisquamish, Songhees people, and there's more nations in there. I don't know them all, but one day I will. It's their story we're telling, all their stories, my auntie's story, my dad's story, about the two sisters my grandfather thought he could bring home. And when Mike had emotionally shared with you, we can't imagine not having my kids with me, my grandkids with me, and to lose our language, to lose our tradition. And the process has moved us in not only just witnessing it on the news, the announcement of the 215, but the first ones I thought of was my mom, my aunties, my cousins. All the other aunties and cousins are everywhere, of all the nations, affected deeply in their heart, like a dagger went in. And I know everybody did their best to reach out to our people in the best way possible, and Langley School District did that. Partnership is more than partnership to us. And learning is part of that process. Taking our time to listen to all that needed to be heard from that day, but also our times of mourning that we had to go through because this had brought up those feelings. And there were so many ceremonies that our people experienced all over British Columbia, across Canada. And Mary Simon said today, the most eloquent lady I ever heard. She brought it right to the Sochtamuk underneath this building, underneath your feet, this Mother Earth. All the four quadrants of yourself, your emotional, your spiritual, your intellectual, and I forget one all the time. Emotional? Say it again. Oh, physical. Oh, that's why see, I'm not physical enough. But I want you to, I always forget physical. But I want you to know that all the ceremonies you can have, all the ceremonies, it will help somebody somewhere. Today is a ceremony in your board office right now, this moment, with us sharing. We're doing a ceremony, but in a modern way, not a traditional way, but that will happen. And I know that you know what I'm talking about, but I know our audience, we will do a tradition. And who brought it up but the last person to speak to us was Harley Chapel. We need you to stand with us. We need you to listen to our people. I'm only one person. I cannot speak for all the Indigenous people that live and work and go to your schools wherever they come from. I even had a mother reach out to me. Can you find something on South Dakota for my family? I have no idea about anything in South Dakota, but I know its name. But that's a role your Loche workers have. The Loche workers, their support workers, those who care, those who help. And the Yayasto is our advisory people that Woody, Mike, and Suzanne, and Mal, and then anybody else that, oh Shelley, sorry Shelley, and then anyone else that I don't see here right now that sit with us, working together, following what the Truth and Conciliation has asked of you, whether you knew it or not. The words come from our ancient ones. From that, so on behalf of my aunties and all the other aunties and uncles and all the ones that are still being found. And my dad just told my oldest son, and he told me last year that he knew where some of them were buried at the St. Mary's School. And it was the hardest thing for my dad to even just share that with my son because it's so deep and hurt. No one can ever fathom that. The work they had to do because the church and the government and the police, everybody that was against their people, since they wanted to take the Indian out of us, that's what they wanted to cover. They don't want anybody to know that truth to happen. What happened to my aunties? What happened to my aunties? What happened to the other people? Family split. My husband's family, Cooper Island, Kamloops, Cranbrook, St. George's, even as far across on the island, the far up top of the island, or across Canada, where our people went. We don't know all the stories, and each time somebody brings it forward, it's that much harder. But at the same time, as my uncle said about his horses and his land being washed away, we've lived through many atrocities. We will adapt and we'll move forward, and we'll continue to fight for what we believe in. And that every one of us, you are part of that. We go shoulder and shoulder together. You have to do that with us. We can't do this alone, but we also have to honor our leaders of this land. You're finally saying their names out loud in your traditional welcome. Continue to do that because you're speaking for those that are gone, those that are trying to go home. And I want you all to know that I'm extremely proud of Mike because I've been in language for 5 years and I still can't do what he just did. But he has Fernie in his classroom or his room, so I can't take any credit that I just follow my love for language because it's part of me. My mom spoke her language, come from leadership on both sides. On my mom's side, Chief Anthony Joe, Rose Draney. On my dad's side, Speckleson, Alpha Gabriel, and his mom, Miriam Zapass, which Chief Billy Zapass, his name on the theater, that's her dad, my grandfather. So our family is very strong in Langley, and we want all of our Indigenous students and my 2 wonderful young women. We need more women to be empowered to speak for our people, as well as our young men. They need to be warriors again, and you need to help with that. That's all I have to say. Thank you. You did awesome.
I would also say that Sesmalot would tell you if she was here that I say it with the biggest accent possible as I do the acknowledgement, and she laughs at me every time. As Cheryl shared, it was through the voices of the leadership who spoke to us and shared and provided us with guidance around next steps. They appreciated the lowering of the flags as a way to honor, but also recognized that that couldn't stay forever, and that flags, while a wonderful symbol, are not truly connected to this place. And so the guidance we received, as Cheryl alluded to at the very end from Chief Harley Chappell, is that the flags were lowered because it was a grieving process. It was a way for us as a community, as a nation, to come together and grieve together. And that it has remained a symbol of a grieving period. But he shared that all things have protocol and process. That even in the grieving process, there are stages you come to and you end and you finish and you move on to the next stage. You don't forget. You don't ever forget. But you move forward. And so it is the guidance from Yayastal, well, from the leadership through to Yayastal today, that suggests that on May 31st, here at the board office, as part of that finishing the grieving process, that we have an honoring ceremony to recognize the survivors, their families, and all those who were not able to return home. And that as part of that, at the end, once that ceremony is complete, flags would be raised back to full mast as a sign of the end of that grieving period and a peace moving forward. It was also brought forward by the leadership that as important as it was to lower those flags for that time period and have that peace, that there needs to be a way that we never do forget. And some form of a permanent monument or memorial be done to honor those students. At this point, as we talked about earlier, learning takes patience and time. And the feeling from the leadership was that it still requires more conversation at their level with Yayastal to really determine what that permanent piece would be. And so we bring forward this motion to you tonight to discuss that the Board of Education follow the guidance of Yayastal, the leadership of Matsqui, Kwantlen, Katzie, and Samiamo First Nations, and the recommendation of district staff to do the following. To host an honoring ceremony on the morning of May 31st, 2022, after which all flags at SD 35 sites will be returned to full mast. And to request further consultation to gain guidance from Yayastol and the leadership of the nations around the establishment of a more permanent memorial to honor residential school survivors and those that did not return. And that memorial would then be used as a teaching piece for all district staff and students. We go back to this very simple motto. Every child matters. And unfortunately, in our past, tens of thousands of students did not matter. This is our opportunity to honor them and to ensure that going forward, all students in this district matter. It's up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We so much appreciate you. Thank you, Mike Pugh, and thank you, Cheryl Gabriel. I've learned so much from your family, the Gabriels, about love and forgiveness, and so I'm forever grateful for that. I do have a motion that has already been read out for us, but I'd like to read it out one more time, and then I'll open up for questions from the trustees. They might want to have a question for you. That the Board of Education follow the guidance of Yayastol, the leadership of Matsqui, Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nations, and the recommendation of district staff to do the following. 1. Host an honoring ceremony on May 31, 2022, at which all flags from all SD 35 sites will be returned to full mast. Secondly, request further consultation to gain guidance from Yayastol and the leadership of Matsqui, Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nations around the establishment of a more permanent memorial to honor residential school survivors and those that did not return. I need a mover and a seconder for this. We'll have Shelley Coburn, and then we'll let Tony Ward do that one. Thank you. And so I'll open it up for questions at this point, and go ahead. Ms. Coburn, you're first.
I don't so much have a question as, of course, I have a comment. Hi, Chika. Yeah. Buddy. Like, that was incredible, right? And that takes so much courage. And Fern, like, I love Fern. And she said something, and it's so important, and I really think it's really important that it gets stated here when we were at the walk to honor the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. And she said, what we need is white male allies. And when I look around the room, I see that allyship happening. And it gives me a lot of hope, because she's right. She's absolutely correct. And so it's really important that people see behavior modeled, and to know that it's okay, and that it's okay to move past some pretty long held negative stereotypes and misconceptions and beliefs that were societal norms that have been challenged, because people have the courage to challenge them. And it's hard to stand up against our peers and say that's not on. So, you know, you're a great role model. And for you, I just always cry. I didn't realize how much I would cry as an elected official. But I would like to say thank you for constantly sharing and coming here and trusting us when the record with education and Aboriginal people gives you no reason to come here and trust us. And not only do you trust us with your children, you trust us with your knowledge that you weren't allowed to share, and that was kept and was underground. And sometimes it's really hard to share those things. And because you've shared so openly, you've enabled me to learn and feel confident culturally and to go and help. And I don't know if I'd be able to do that without your teachings, and I appreciate it. And I hope that as a district and as a board, that we can do a little bit of justice to your family and your aunties. And I'm really sorry that this is what has happened to your family. Hka.
Thank you, Ms. Coburn. And now on to Charlie Fox. Trustee Fox, can you get a comment?
For your words tonight, for your deliberations over the last almost year. The wisdom which you've imparted on us through this process, I think, has been very enlightening and extremely worthwhile. And it's an unfortunate set of circumstances that got us to this place, but I think we're all better for it in the long run. I think that for me personally, it's been a very educational journey, one that I've learned a lot and appreciate a lot. And just for Cheryl's perspective, my wife used to teach Cheryl. She taught all the Gabriels except one, your older brother. And I've shared a lot of my journey with her through this process, because she, being involved in your education as a mentor and as a teacher, and hopefully as a female that has a lot of strength. I can tell you she's got a lot of strength. You know, I hope, I really appreciate what you've done and the leadership you've provided. Thank you.
You're here. Thank you, Charlie Fox. Any other comments from trustees? Okay, go ahead. Marty Wilson, please.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl and Mike. That was beautifully said. And Cheryl, I'm just so sorry for your loss of your two aunties and all that you have lost, because it's been far more than that, I know. But this engagement with Yayastal was so important for this board, and especially to go to the Four Nations and their leaders. And I can't thank you enough on behalf of our board for doing that work. I know that it was long, but sometimes things take a long time. And I feel like it needed that time to consult and walk beside. We hear those words, yet it's like, what do they mean? And I feel like this was finally a true show of that. And I just think of all the mistakes and atrocities of the past. And if we would have just consulted and walked beside, we probably, wouldn't be where we are today. So I think that's a lovely idea about having the honoring ceremony, and I'm so looking forward to being a part of it and moving, from the mourning and grieving to the honoring and recognizing. So thank you so much for all that you've done.
Thank you very much. And on to Trustee Pro. Did you have a comment? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I don't even know if I know what I'm supposed to say, can say. First, Hka, you have my heart. You, Mike, Hka, thank you for your vulnerability. It's really critical for all of us to receive that, regardless of who we are in our place in this room. Humility is what allows us to learn and to listen and to serve. Coming into my role as a trustee, the journey's been long. The journey's been long, forgive me. And it's been long in the sense that learning about my own path and being honored to sit on the Yayastal has been a long path. And each of you are just beautiful people who allow each of us to be carried in our own place in our journey, wherever we are in that path, in the midst of our grieving process, because what I've learned is it's almost encompassing. And I always make this joke every time I come before us, here I am crying. And here I am again. And it's because of that grieving process, the experience of loss and curiosity and the why, and then what lies before. And you made a powerful statement, Cheryl. You said, we don't flow in the water the same way each time. And in that flow, there's healing, and there's recovery, and there's restoration, and there's a washing. And that washing gives us strength. And when you come before us today, you give our children strength. And you give us mothers strength to speak that truth back into our children when we've been erased for so many years. And you've washed us, and you're washing us. And to the Creator, I ask that you get washed in return, that you're renewed and you're strengthened in your mind, your body, your spirit. And I thank you for your service. Richka.
And the only comments that to bring some comments to conclusion before we bring it to a vote is, as I said before, I've learned so much. And I'm so much better for knowing you and your family. And these are not just words. The school district really it's a great school district. And we all love it. Our team loves it. And tonight you asked for a request. You said, would you stand with us? So, I just want to say, yes, I want to stand with you. And I believe our hearts would say the same. Every one of us would like to stand with you. We will stand with you. And it's a new season. We've all these floods and all this stuff's behind us. So, there's the great reset, I guess. Some have said it, but I'm very optimistic, very excited about where we're going. It's all about a relationship. We've always had a wonderful relationship and with our First Nations. And I'm so grateful for what you've taught us and all of the teams that come into our schools and teach our students as well. It's absolutely wonderful. We don't hear the words love, spirit, all that kind of stuff. We just don't get that. That's not part of our regular language. But around here, when you guys come in here, that's what you talk about. And it's just really beautiful. And so I just want to say thank you for that. And for everyone that's in the audience, so I'm going to read out the motion one more time and we'll vote on it. But I'd like to invite you to be here at 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning, the 31st, and we will go through this. We will stand with you on that day. We bless you. Great. Okay. All right, I'd like to read the motion one more time and then we'll vote on it, please. That the Board of Education follow the guidance of Yaztall, the leadership of Matsqui, Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nations, and the recommendation of district staff to do the following. 1, host an honoring ceremony on May 31, 2022, after which all flags at all ST35 sites will be returned to full mast. Secondly, request further consultation to gain guidance from Yaztall and the leadership of Matsqui, Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nations around the establishment of a more permanent memorial to honor residential school survivors and those that did not return. I'd like to call the question at this point. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. More excitement ahead of us. Okay, we'll just take a 2-minute break at this point, and then I'll call you back in order in about 2 minutes. So just a quick break. And thank you very much. On with the rest of our meeting. I'm at 7.2, Langley's Youth Engagement Project. And I know we've got some guest speakers for this, but I'd like to hand it over to you, Superintendent. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair Ross. I'm excited to introduce our speakers this evening for the presentation on the Youth Engagement Project. The work with the Youth Engagement Project started in 2019 by a joint project with the school district and the RCMP. And I see we have Craig Van Herk here this evening, who was one of the folks that started this with former district principal Renge Bailey in 2019. The work has continued. We've got new members of the team. We've got Maggie Gabriel, who's been supporting the team, and as well, Aya Hare has also been supporting. And what an opportunity to do probably the simplest thing, but perhaps the one thing that as a district we haven't done near enough, which is engaging our youth in a conversation about what they need. And again, making sure that the youth that we're engaging are the youth that really are the ones that we haven't engaged in the past, and really being careful about asking the right questions in the right way. And this team has done that work, and I certainly appreciate that. And not only have they done the work in asking, they've worked with our community partners as well in putting together some recommendations moving forward that have come from the students as well. So without further ado, I'll ask the team to please come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. It was my job to introduce the talk today, and so I'll thank Mr. Gill for also introducing the thing for me as well. So today we're gonna just go through introducing what was happening around that, tell you a bit what it looked like, talk through a little bit of the data, and some of the opportunities they're coming up with. From my perspective, the beautiful thing about this, two beautiful things, and I'm sure I will mention it a little later too, was the extent to which students were able to give voice to their needs in our community, and the way in which it brought the community together to respond to that. I think both of those are just beautiful things happening right now. And but I'm going to pass it over to Corporal Van Herk, who was part of the original group of people that started this off with Renge Bailey. He's going to give you a little bit of history around that, and then we'll pass it over to Aya, who's done all the work around this. And my hands go up to Aya for the work that she's done around this, because it's been amazing work, and I think there's going to be some really cool things happening in the district as a result of that. So I will pass it on to Corporal Van Herk.
Do I need any of this stuff?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, good. I thought I was going to be one of the beautiful people that are beautiful things, the two beautiful things. I guess not. I am in different clothes today, and I know that half of you probably didn't recognize me and so on. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk about it. It is something that I'm actually still very excited about, and I'm more excited to have been here tonight for Cheryl and Mike and all of that work that's done, because that is powerful. And I think this is actually going to go hand in hand with it, because we've learned so many things over the time from it. And I think what we've learned are a couple key things, is that patience and time, and good things can come out of bad things. When bad things happen, good people rise to the top, and we can actually make a difference. So back in 2019, August 2019, Langley had a catastrophe. We had a young person that died and didn't need to die. And out of that, we were rocked. We didn't really know what to do, but we knew we had to do something. So the leadership from the Langley School District met with the leadership from the RCMP across the street in the officer in charge's boardroom. And Renge Bailey and I were invited to that, because we both had some influence over parts of what we thought was not the problem, but where the solution was going to come from. We were tasked with that meeting, with getting together and working it out and trying to figure out what to do. Both of us thought we were fairly smart, pretty good problem solvers, and we thought we could come up with some problems, talk to the right people, and life would be good, until we sat down and we actually talked about it and realized that If we threw one more adult solution into the mix, we would have just another program. We'd have just another thing for kids to do, and it wouldn't actually work. And that's where everything started. We realized that we hadn't actually consulted with any of the young people, and not just any of the young people, but any of the young people that were actually affected by it. We've talked to our kids in our schools. My youth team talked to kids in schools all the time. We talk to adults all the time. We never really talk to the right ones because sometimes they're a little more difficult to talk to and to coordinate. So that's where it all started back in 2019. Skip ahead to where we went from there. We decided we talked to the right kids. We arranged to have the right kids. We had to know what to ask them. So we did far more work. Again, it takes time, it takes patience to come up with the right questions. But we came up with what we were sure were the right questions. We took it to the kids. They gave us honest answers that didn't make us feel real good. Showed some of our shortcomings, but it gave us an opportunity. We took that opportunity back to the community, overwhelming support from the community to do something. And then we got to that point where we were just about ready to do something and COVID kicked us. So things kind of slowed down. I'm going to fast forward to where we are now because, again, out of unfortunate circumstances, we can turn that into a huge positive. And the positive is we came back with renewed energy. We had Aya, we had Magdi. Now we had a whole team and we had had some time to chew on some things and they took it from there. And we've now had an opportunity to meet with our young people again, the right young people. We've met with our community partners. They're still pumped and excited. We had the opportunity to have Cheryl be at the meeting with the community leaders and do the initial welcoming and the greeting and the blessing. And she challenged us like I've never been challenged before. So it's encouraging all at the same time. So that's the basis. That's the history of it. Where it goes from there, I'm going to let the really smart people, the really beautiful people talk now.
So I think that's the thing for me, is that we invited Cheryl to be our welcomer and she ended up staying for the entire day. And she gave us so much great information and really talked to all the community partners and just, we had those kind of people come, like those elders in our community, those people with knowledge for each of their organizations participate. Anyway, I'm going to backtrack a bit here. How do I turn to the next slide? Like this? Nope. Oh, awesome. Thanks. That's why Craig's still here. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about, and forgive me, I'm going to need this just to make sure I don't forget anything. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the Youth Engagement Project looked like this year. And I've asked Craig jump in and Magdi too, because they were instrumental parts. And this isn't just about me, no matter what they say. There are a lot of people that have participated and really helped gather this information about our youth and the youth that we serve. And I'm really honored to be here to share it with you because we're just at the start of something really great here in Langley, I think. So here's the roadmap for this year. We started with a community partnership meeting, and I'm going to focus on that a lot more at the beginning because it really helps set the stage. And then we had a youth forum in December where all the youth came, and I'll explain a little bit about each of these. We worked on putting together the repeating words and pulled all the quotes and streamed them. And by we, that was me. That was the bulk of the work because just lessons learned from Renge and Craig is that we didn't want anyone to know where the information was coming from. And so I'll keep that one with me. The really shocking thing to me was that the kids said the exact same thing across the board, the different ages and the different areas. And then we brought all the information, the repeating words, which were pretty powerful, and the themes, and brought all the community partners together in April again and streamed what are the kids saying, had some subcommittees after to make sure we got it right. And then it was just last week that we held the Youth Engagement Forum on May 17th, where we said to the kids, did we get this right? And whew, we got it right because I was kind of nervous about that. And then next thing is starting here with you. We're going to share what the kids said. And then the really exciting work is down to business is working with going back to our community partners saying, okay, How can we chip away at these barriers so that kids have a clear pathway to success? So I'm just going to explain in a nutshell so you have a good idea. And if you have questions later, this will help answer at least the forum. And we wanted to have a trauma-informed action research project kind of approach. So we're leading to the positives and we're giving the kids lots of opportunities to share their ideas and take our direction from them. So at the community partnership forum with all the community partners, in November, we really want to discuss the goals, the who's, what's, and the questions and the guiding principles. So the goals were, we wanted to know, well, the biggest goals were we wanted to make sure that we had a trauma-informed approach so that all of our kids felt safe and that they all made sure, that's why Craig just jumps up here and does this effortlessly. No, go back one. Don't go ahead yet. Our goals were to invite I knew I forgot something really important. Our goals were to invite the community partners and see who else needed to be invited and to make a commitment to action. So we spent some time with our community partners. It's great to hear this from our kids, but we really want people around the table and participating who are going to take this information at the end of this process seriously and make a commitment to action and work together to make sure that we have these ideas come to fruition for our kids. So we can go back to them with real dignity and say, we care about you. We want to make the Langleys safer and more wonderful for you so that you thrive. And we wanted to make sure that the goals were at that meeting, that we wanted to make sure that we had a shared understanding of who we wanted to hear from and what we wanted to hear. And what the community partners decided was we didn't just want to hear from older kids. We wanted to have a real span of middle and high school participants. And what we wanted to hear from them was not their stories necessarily, because we wanted to make it really safe for them to be anonymous and not come in thinking that it was about them sharing their personal stories in an unsafe way for them, but for them to come as knowledge keepers or experts of what youth need to be successful. And then we're going to share, the next slide has just the questions in a nutshell. And I'll explain more about the forum, but these are the questions that we asked the youth, and it took the whole morning, and they took it very seriously. What would help you feel more connected to healthy adults in the school and community? If you had a magic wand, what could we do to remove barriers for accessing supports at school and in the community? And what are you and your peers missing in the areas of mental health and/or substance use support? Example, what would make your life better? The last thing is just at the heart of it is our guiding principles, where that we wanted the youth to be anonymous in participating, and we wanted to create the safest space and hold it for them. So we had 2 clinicians that were involved in this whole process, and always sort of Maggie tapping us on the shoulder and saying, okay, have you thought about this? And so we made sure that even though Craig wanted to come in a safety bear outfit, we made sure that there were very few adults in the room, and that would. Every community partner engaged in the beginning wanted to participate, wanted to come and just give all their love to the kids, but we had to kind of hold them back and say, this is about the kids being safe and sharing their information. So we front loaded them. They knew the questions before they came. They knew why. I held meetings with the safe staff that brought the youth, and they were their safe people. And even we had what happens at the table stays at the table. So they could vent, they could share whatever, and that was their safe space to do so. And the very last most important thing was we didn't want kids to feel like they had to come and share their personal stories. A lot of them have, and a lot of them have personal stories. The kids that came and participated had multiple barriers. They were very diverse, and that was on purpose from the community partners. We wanted to hear from all different kids across our district, not just the ages or areas. And so I guess the next slide. You really are a wonderful assistant. Yeah, thank you. So then we got to the Youth Engagement Project day, and it was amazing. And Maggie and I have talked about this a number of times because Maggie came and helped us set it up as well. The kids came. We had anywhere from 3 to 10 youth representative from all the middle and high schools in Langley, minus LEC. Oh, go back one. Don't go ahead too fast so I don't forget. And then the kids who came were visibly diverse, neurodiverse, just very culturally diverse. we had quite a few new refugees to the country who came. They were very different kids from all over that had very different challenges. And they took it seriously. It was impressive. I think probably just because I had to live with it, all the words repeating all over the walls in my room, maybe I held it a little bit closer. But I am nothing but just blown away and just honored at how much the kids trusted us to give this information. So this is one of the quotes, the only quote that I shared at the second community forum. And this is the only quote I shared on purpose. And this was advice from Craig and Rengie too. And they haven't steered me wrong yet, is that there was a lot of really rich information from the quotes and ideas, but we wanted to get at what was similar between all the kids as an action research project. But this one just really struck me. Our kids want to be heard. They want to be seen. They want us as adults to look after them and give them what they need. And they feel like they're not involved. And that was repeated over and over again in decisions made about them. And they're all very excited that we listened to them. They felt honored in that, but they're just trepidatious that we weren't going to really do anything about it. And I really love that even they were so honest that one of the groups sent me a side note with this, and that's why I'm sharing this quote. So then I'm going to do these last 4 bits quicker. So the repeating, I collected all the information from all the anonymous sites. We had a couple of youth that did their own remotely because they weren't able to attend, and I just layered it all in together so I couldn't tell. There were a multitude of repeating words that were obvious, and so I collected by 3 streams each of the different questions, and I shared that sheet with the community partners that came in April, as well as the themes for each of them. And they had cards, and I kind of get them to go down to business. And so they are all doing sorting and streaming, and then there are separate tables, about 4 to 5 people at each table. And we kind of thought we might have the answers at the end of that, but really it just was such a rich conversation that we had to do subcommittees after. And then we got down to it and kind of get back to the larger group. And so I'm going to share with you in a second, because we got, okay, this is what we think you said and what you need. And then we took it back last week to the youth, and we got their advice. They said their advice was, you got it right. And then of course they gave me a little bit of ways that I could tweak it a little bit. But that's what I'm going to present with you now. So now we're here to start that. We're sharing this information with you, and then we're going to take it back to community partners and start doing the really tough work. So this is what our kids said. To live well and thrive in Langley, youth need to feel safe, healthy, connected, valued, and empowered. They need relationships with healthy adults. And what was used over and over again was healthy, accessible adults. Kids use that language. They need to feel like they have safe spaces in schools and community. They need a transportation infrastructure. They need accessible, preventative, and responsive when I need it, over and over again, also repeated, individual and family support in schools and community, in particular with mental health, substance use, and sexual health. They need enhanced collaboration with youth about all these topics. What gets in their way? So when we're talking about pathways to care, those are the barriers that they can't get around. The lack of clear pathways for youth to access assistance when they need it in a safe, trauma-informed, stigma-free way. Barrier-free, including financial, language, and transportation barriers. Transportation was one of the most repeated words throughout every question, throughout every group. They need prevention, intervention, not always accessible and available in either school or community, and they need resources. They have often, kids find that there's low resource awareness, even though it's out there. There's even ways to get it. They don't know where it is. They don't know how to access it. They have difficulty accessing existing resources because of wait times, financial, transportation, and stigma, and they're missing or gaps in resources. So here's the overarching themes, just sort of in a nutshell, more to encapsulate. So community collaboration approach, including youth, always at the heart and the center. And then accessibility, resources, services, transportation, healthy, accessible adults. And then safe spaces, trauma-informed, stigma-free in community and in school. So this is one of the quotes that I stole from last week. And yeah, I try not to get too choked up about this. I obviously care very deeply, and I'm really lucky because I get to work with all these other turkeys that care just as much as me, which really gives me a lot of energy to keep doing the work. So not only Craig and Magdi, but as I alluded to before, just so many amazing, magnificent community partners that are willing to rise to the occasion. They've had years to kind of think about it and mill it over. A couple of years ago when Randy and Craig started it, it was at the beginning and there was a lot of hurt in our community. And now people are, let's get down to business. And that's a perfect chance for us. So I guess just in closing, because I'm going to finish this one up here. The next thing is our opportunities and next steps. So we want to talk about taking this data back to partners. And one of the things that I wanted to mention was, I know that everybody knows that the Foundry is coming to Langley, that we're actually opening in less than a month, the dry opening. And some people, and I've heard some people talk about it being kind of in regards to being a magical bullet, like it's going to fix everything. And it will be fantastic, amazing, actually. I'm really excited for it, but it won't fix all of these gaps. So we really need to not forget about this and start digging into this work with our community partners. And that's going to be our real work for the next couple of years as a school district and as a community. And I think the school and community bridge is so important to be able to check off this work or give the kids what they need, what they're saying they need. I thought maybe came up there. And then our biggest learnings, and these are the two things that we've talked about a few times, and I've heard Craig and Magdi would talk about this too. We've all talked about it, is this so important. We've learned how important youth voice is in all of this work. Nothing for them without them. And we often forget that as adults. And we have to not forget it because they know what they need. They're very articulate. And they want to share that and be involved. And so I asked them at the forum last week, who would be interested in stepping away from anonymity and being involved in some projects? Because the interest generated from so many different places in the community about the kids giving their voice to different things. Now I said, well, we can't do that yet. You know, I'm kind of feel like they're my baby. I don't want them to be in a situation where they're doing something we haven't asked them to do. It's not safe. But when I asked them that, it was quite impressive how many of the kids sent messages and said, yes, we'd like to be involved in the overdose crisis awareness at the end of August, or yes, we'd like to be involved with the Foundry development and some of the work, or yes, we'd like to look at resource mapping for youth in the community. There's quite a few different things that different community partners have asked for. And then the last thing, which is key is in meeting the needs, is our community partnerships. We are so fortunate here. And I know you've heard me say that about 10 times now, haven't you? But we're so lucky here. We have this fantastic opportunity. And if we work together, because we all know the school district is a monster organization with so much potential and power in our district. If we lead that work and connect and build off that work, our kids have the biggest possibility of thriving. And that's what we all want. I was just looking at him. I thought he might tell me a dad joke. Okay.
I have some great jokes, but definitely not the time for it.
So I really honestly really thank you so much for listening and for thinking about this. And we'll be probably coming back to have a chat with you sometime later with some asks.
Wait for it.
I'm just letting you know.
Thank you very much. Is that the concluding of your presentation then?
Yes,
Okay,
thank
great.
you.
I know we're gonna have some questions, but I just want to get this on the floor. So can I get a mover and a seconder that the Board of Education receives the report on Langley's Youth Engagement Project 2021/2022 for information as presented. And let's Coburn and David Todd. Good. There you go. Okay. I like to get a little bit of both, you see that way, okay? I need all those in favor. Oh, we're gonna questions first. Let's get questions. Okay, I've got a number of questions here. Shelley Coburn is first, and then I've got Suzanne Perrella.
Anyhow, thank you very much. Topic that's near and dear to my heart. Quick question. You needed to consult the right people. Who are the right kids and where did you find them and how did you know they're the right ones?
Well, we had the idea we wanted the right kids. So the right kids are the kids, any kids that have experienced barriers in accessing supports that feel like they could, or they're accessing them, but their friends aren't, and they're having difficulties or trouble struggling. And that could be across the board. You know, as leading the enhanced support teams through the last couple of years with COVID, it's just really clear that people and youth, children, and families are struggling in different ways. So it was really that was the parameter. And then we really intentionally went to the schools and asked their enhanced support teams, so youth care workers, Aboriginal support workers, and principals, counselors, who would be some kids that you could tap on the shoulder that you think would come. And I had some pretty interesting questions back from staff, but you know, just about who those kids should be. The kids were very different and diverse. You know, some of the kids had not had the easiest time and struggled in school. Some had struggled in school academically, some had struggled in school behaviorally, some had really big challenges in the community. There's a real diverse group of kids, and that's what we wanted. Who are the kids in your school that you think could bring a voice to help us lead some of this work? Yeah.
We're going to engagement. So I'm just hoping that kids that often will say they feel left out, yet they have all this experience, they're left out because they're busy coping with life and functioning. And so I'm just hoping that those kids were the kids that were invited to the table. Thank you.
That was at the heart of our trying to lead our adults to choose the right children, because you're right, who the right children are. We didn't, we made it pretty clear that they had to be kids that would bring that knowledge, that lived experience, and that those were the kids we wanted to talk to. And very many of the kids weren't kids who ever typically had participated in anything like this. And many of the schools say people were the Aboriginal support workers. And some of them would come up and talk to me after and tell me some of the stories of the kids. I was trying not to know them because I thought it would just make it so much more difficult to be, you know, impartial. So afterwards, more at the second forum, people came to talk to me more. But I do believe we had the right kids. And even I was really lucky, fortunate to be at the Aboriginal Awards ceremony the other evening, and a lot of kids came up to me like, "Hey, Aya," you know, they, and so, yep. And the feedback from the safe people from the schools was overwhelmingly that the kids felt valued. They loved it. They didn't just love the pizza. Although Claire, I got to give a horn to Claire Pereira. She really looked after us. And yeah, I think we did that.
Thank you very much. And on to Suzanne Pearl. Go ahead.
There we go. Thank you, Chair Ross. Absolutely fabulous information. It's what you guys are doing. It's super exciting, coming from my own personal lens and my other work that I do. I was writing down all these questions, and as you were presenting, you were answering, and one of the big ones was, okay, when we're doing stuff that is surrounding trauma, what are we doing as a buffer to support? And you said we had clinicians there, and I was like, wow, like that superintendent, that makes us superstars in my eyes. Tells me we're really pushing into the understanding of trauma informed. So I really appreciate that. The statement, it gives us hope that there's adults who care. Key word in that is hope. Hope is so important for all of us, but especially our kiddos who are wrestling with the copious amount of barriers, especially as we're navigating through these times, because hope floats. It gives us a vision, it gives us a pathway to move forward to. And when we have those opportunities instilled into our youth, they are able to rise up with some level of stamina, not resilience. I don't like the word resilience. I don't like to think I had resilience for something that was put upon me as a child, but definitely there was stamina, there continues to be. And when we instill hope, what you guys are doing, instilling hope and helping them to understand there's opportunity for attachment experiences is really profound. It's the most profound work we can do as educators in the system, period, because at that point in time in juncture, we're saving lives. And that's why I do what I do here, is I'm out to save lives and working through that. So that being said, I just want to acknowledge that important work because it's really critical stuff that you guys are doing. But I do want to understand, if you would, help me see a bigger picture. You use the term trauma-informed frequently. I want to understand from your lens and the program's lens, what does trauma-informed look like in practicality, and what are we doing to support our staff, supporting our kiddos? Because when our staff are absorbing, I know when I absorb my clients, I need a place to decompress. And so what are we doing to support our staff to help them in their triggers? So for anybody who doesn't know what a trigger is, it's an experience that arises up in the body that activates an emotion from another place in time. It's a wound. And so we all walk with those things. And so when our staff are being called to this important work, what are we doing to wrap around to support them in this process, to decompress and get them ready to go back in again? Because this is the heaviest lifting. Delivering curricula is important work, but this is the work. And so I want to know that we're really operating from that lens and that spirit of care, and what trauma-informed looks like around all of that.
I guess there's two questions, two answers. The first, there can be slightly different definitions of trauma-informed, but in our mind and kind of what we held for this project at least is we know that trauma affects the brain, especially complex trauma, and that healing ACEs is one of our main focus. So when many of the kids who participated and many of the safe adults who participated have experienced different adverse life experiences. And so we wanted to make sure that as much as possible, we made it safe, predictable, and engaging, and that there was trust. There was no promises that we didn't follow up on. And that's the best way I can say, just for the way we set up the program. And when it comes to how the district is looking after staff, I can only say from my own experience and being involved in some of the work that's starting to be done with Healthy Schools, Healthy Staff, is that we're ahead of a lot of other districts when it comes to thinking about that and putting structures in place and process in place to start that work. And I think I'm going to leave somebody who does that work to explain it better. And but I really encourage you to ask more about that, to get that kind of presentation in here. Because you'd love it and you'd be so proud of it. There's a lot being done. And I work with some of those folks, but I only get little tidbits of it. And then from my own experience, predominantly working with at-risk youth populations over, I shouldn't tell you how many years I've been doing it, but anyway, I'm always learning. I just know that we need to be aware of it for our kids, but we also need to be aware of it for our staff, because you know, if you just look at the Raising Canada stats coming out of the pandemic, and every year I look at it, just what affects kids, it isn't just the kids, it's the staff that have all of those different, and I won't name them all, but I'm sure all of you are aware. So we do need to be more aware of those things and put structures and process in place to look after our kids and our staff. And our district has started that work. I know they've started digging into it pretty well.
That's fabulous. Just a point of clarification coming through the chair. When you say ACEs, are you referring to adverse childhood effects? Is that okay? I just wanted to ensure that so everybody else knew what we were talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee. Now on to Trustee Charlie Fox and then Marnie Wilson.
Thank you. Oh, Eric driving his police car somewhere. There, that one. There you go. Oh, okay. We're looking now at the orange dot there, share the roadmap with the adults to start a clear path for the youth we serve present. So my question to you is, the partners that you've got on board, are they all social service agencies?
Some are, we started in November with a lot of those partners that were easy because we've been working with them over the last couple of years. So different agencies, organizations. Some were government, like municipal and provincial, federal. They were involved at the beginning, but now it's, we do have the city planners for both the township and Langley involved in this project. And there are some different agencies and organizations and volunteer groups, quite a few actually, that work to serve our kids and our families in our community. I'm trying to think of other things. And then not for profit. That's the only thing that we don't have yet, except for we do have the now on board and just started, but came to the forum and then is really involved moving forward is the Langley Hospital Foundation. So as a real point of interest for them, but there, and obviously the Langley School District Foundation is a key partner as well for us.
Well, that's very broad based, and that's excellent. I was thinking in the context of moving forward, and you look at some of the identifying barriers, and some of those would obviously be best dealt with at the municipal level, whether it's the city or the township. And I wondered if A, they were involved, and B, you asked a really pertinent question moving forward, and that was, are any of the youth, would you feel comfortable coming out talking to groups? And I know when youth talk at the municipal level, people listen. They listen far more intently and outcome based than they do when there's adults talking. And I know that for a fact because the Youth Resource Center was a project that was near and dear. And I did none of the talking. It was always the youth. And if you can take that step further, but I realize comfort zone and so on and so forth are all part of it. But thank you for answering that.
Thank you. Trustee Marty Wilson, please, and then I'll have Trustee David Todd.
I'll just ask. Oh, there it goes. I just want to thank you, all three of you. It's amazing work and hard work. And I know Aya would be a great person for the job because she'll get in there and do the work. So that's awesome. I loved something that you guys said at the beginning about the very initial meeting and how what you heard didn't feel good and showed us our shortcomings. And so often when you get to that stage, it's like, how do we kind of, just move away from this? Because who wants to deal with that? But to know that you, just took it and ran with it and jumped in and realized that that's the hard work you got to do. So thank you for going ahead with that. I had the same question as Trustee Coburn about who were the right kids. So that was great the way you answered that. I guess another question that I've got is you said that you recognized a lot of repeating kids mentioning a barrier was transportation. So I also feel often that that is a barrier for our students. So what kind of next steps would be involved with solving that barrier for our students?
How to solve the problems of the world. No, actually, I really do think we have the answers. We just haven't figured it out yet. That's the best thing I can say. We have,
I gotta write that one down.
yeah.
That's a good.
Transportation is key. How we do it. I mean, Mal had some great ideas. There you go, Mal. Throw you under the bus, but you did. Just how to make sure that we have people available, but then it's a bigger issue, just the political advocacy I feel is the strongest. If there are other districts that have, like municipalities, not the school districts, that have free busing for all students. Here we have under 12 are free, and that happened only because a lot of political advocacy. So when we put those kind of things in place, then that allows all of the families that have financial barriers to have dignity and be able to get or access anything they want, because that is one of the biggest issues. For all of our kids. Then there's obviously some of our rural areas that just don't have bus systems. That's a whole other ball of wax. But there are several different ideas. But like I said, I mean, well, I didn't actually tell you, I told these two before, is that it was just killing me not to give my ideas to all of the community partners. Like I tried very hard to give them the information and give them the opportunity, because they just are such brilliant people and they had to be engaged in it, and not give them answers. And then to come back and we'll talk about it. A lot of them know me and know the district and know lots of people within the district. So we'll have some of those side conversations, but we're going to take this to different levels and different places. So we're starting with you, obviously, and we would love it to have that political advocacy that I know a lot of you have for at least the transportation issue. Marnie, yeah.
I think the other thing with that is that that's probably one of the things that we need to re-unpack with the kids. So it's one thing for us to say, well, okay, we heard from you that there's a transportation issue. Here's some solutions. It's another thing to say, these are the solutions that actually work with you, right? You know, so I think that's one thing that we probably need to get the kids together to unpack a little bit. What would be the thing that would help you? Like, is it more transit, or is it something else that might be better?
It's the same with resources too. There's a few unanswered questions, obviously. I mean, we've got a lot of information, but just to go back to them and ask them, is it more that they're missing the things you need, or that you can't get to them, or that you just feel like you're so worried you can't walk through the door? We're not sure about all the details. We just know the kids have given us a lot to start with.
We want to intentionally take us out of the equation, our thought process, and get into theirs. Transportation could mean so much, like you said, Magdi, for them, that, you know what, I think, oh, that's great. This should be easy. Let's just get them all bus passes. It's simple. But are they actually going to take the 45-minute bus ride because the routes don't work out? Or do we actually have to move something a little, I don't know, we need to go back to them intentionally with a little more specifics now that we have the general.
I look forward to hearing those results.
Thank you, Trustee Marnie Wilson. And I've got Trustee David Todd as my final speaker.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very much look forward to this, because I think this will be a defining moment in the Langley community. And I think, as referenced earlier, how we respond to crisis says a lot about our community. Winston Churchill spoke in 1909. He said, it's an old saying, but with great power comes great responsibility. And so, yes, we've asked, and the students have given their voice to us, but then we need to kind of, how do we get to that action point? And that was the one question I had, because yes, you've given us the list of what they basically are looking for, and some of it sounds fairly obvious, or and not easy, but something that we could manage. You also mentioned that the school district is a great, it's we have over 3,500 employees in this area. So that's 3,500 potential adults that can make a difference in every one of these students' lives. And so, again, I think it's important to have the student voice and be intentional and listen to what they want, because I know I've said before, I think I know what might be good for them, but that's not what they're telling us. So how do we keep it genuine and authentic as we move forward? I guess that would be my biggest ask.
Well, I guess, look around. So I think that the most important thing is just that, yeah, these two kept me very honest, and the process was intentionally set up so that none of my, although I have my lens, I couldn't deny the repeating words and the themes, and that I had people fact checking, to keep me more honest, and that it wasn't, at that point, it wasn't about my ideas, because I have ideas. It's just sharing this information honestly, and then we're going to go back to the community partners and discuss what our next steps are, and our school system will take that information back and discuss what next steps are too. And then together, I'm hoping we can really chip away at a lot of this.
think there's two things also to be added.
Yes.
Trustee Todd, one is that this process isn't over. Right, you know what I mean? So the authenticity is going back to the kids next year and going, hey, here's, continuing the conversation. So that's part of it. And I think the other thing that we haven't mentioned yet too is our involvement with the Foundry, which is going to be instrumental. It's not going to be the thing, but it's going to be certainly instrumental. And we're one of the only districts that really is getting involved in the Foundry at the ground floor right now. So I is going to be involved in the Foundry. So she's got all this information and she's going to be, stationed there. And so to create that partnership, because school districts are the biggest consumers is the wrong word of Foundries, right? But in most cases, it's a separate entity, and this is going to be quite a partnership for us, and I think that's going to be huge as well.
And thirdly, the more we talk about it in public, the more community partners that we involve, the more accountability we have to actually keep it moving forward and keep it moving forward correctly. And correctly is very intentionally getting the right youth in the room, keeping them engaged, but also keeping the right adults in the room and keeping the right adults out of the room. Sometimes it's more important for us to step back. No, we influence things. And I know that because I've been a police officer for 24 and a half years. I walk into a room like this, it's different than if I walk in my uniform. So we walk in and we can have an effect, positive or negative, depending on what everybody here already feels about what the situation is. So we intentionally hold each other accountable, and I think it was Mike or Cheryl said it, humility, knowing when you're the problem or when you're part of the solution. And sometimes it just, yeah, you know what, we're not going to be at that meeting, not because we don't want to, but because it's the right thing to do for that situation. We're still going to be a part of it, but we are. So the more people that we involve in public, the more accountable we actually are going to be. So I think that's the important part too.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I've got one more trustee for a final comment. Go ahead, Suzanne Pearl.
Hey, thank you, Chair Ross. My comment is, I think this program's so fabulous. I really do, listening to you all and talking about the big picture and the nuances and flying over top and looking at those small steps. It really deserves a highlight reel, like a press release. This is a really important conversation because the amount of partner groups, the impact, the conversation that surrounds the wellness of our district. When we look at the conversations we're having earlier tonight about what makes us attractive, how we care for our students is number one. And it's central to everything we do. And this really deserves a great acknowledgement because of the big work that's being done and the ripple effect that will happen. Like when Cheryl spoke earlier, again, like we don't float down the water the same way. And this is one of those conversations. And I really applaud you all for the work, and whomever else that's not here needs to hear that from this board, how excited we are about this program, because what you're doing is fabulous. So I just hope that we see something broadcasted on this, because it's really worthy of that.
And I have to say that I have to agree, and I'm sure our communications team the manager has heard that. And, it's not fabulous. It's world class. And so I'm all for it. Let's go. Thank you very much for your presentation. And now I've got to call the question. All those in favor of the Board of Education receives the report on Langley's Youth Engagement Project. All those in favor? And it's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. 7.3 is Summer Session 2022. The Board receives the report on Summer Session 202 for information. So Superintendent, I take this over to you.
Thank you, Chair Ross. Our last report of the evening is an update on summer session for 2022. We have District Principal of Continuing Education here, Mr. Sam Maraka, who's taken over for District Principal Ron Stair. So this is his first year doing this presentation. So hopefully he'll be back a number of years. The summer session itself has been very successful in Langley. It's given us an opportunity to stretch the education of our students right through the months of August, or sorry, so July mostly, and beginning of August, and for some students, kind of bridging into September as well. So there's an opportunity for Mr. Maraca just to be able to kind of give us an update of where we are today, and some of the offerings that we'll have this summer. So District Principal Maraca, you're up.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to try to be fairly quick. So most of the information that you'll see is on the slides, but I'll try to add information that isn't on the slides. So that's the intent. Again, I'll connect this for myself through, I think, all 4 quadrants, but really for me, lifelong passion for learning, flexible and connected environments, and inclusive and accepting culture are areas that I feel that summer session is targeting. Just going through the overview here, registration opened April 20th online. Most of the information about the program can be found at the website, so I would encourage you, if you're looking for any further information, to visit the website. For 2022, a few changes. We opened it up April 20th. Last year, I think we were around May 7th or 10th. That was for SD 35 students. Then we opened up on May 10th for city and township students. And then yesterday, yesterday, we opened it up to any students in the province. Generally, Surrey would be our biggest outside district, because our programs are pretty much on the west side of Langley, with the exception of Parkside's program. So most of it would be bordering on our western border. And these are the numbers as of last week. Elementary, middle 1,800, and secondary at 750. So encouraging numbers. Secondary, a little bit of a concern in that those who may need some additional support, our program is filling up fairly quickly. So that's a bit of a concern. The other thing is that just like last year, students can only take 1 class during the academic remedial or the skill building sessions are for 3 weeks, and full credit courses are for 5 weeks. And those are going to come up later in the presentation. Diversity of programs from grade 1 through 12. We talk about 1 through 12, but we do have a program for current kindergarten students in the Jumpstart for grade 1. However, the K experience starts in September for students. So that's it's grades 1 through 12, although current kindergarten students do have opportunities. Kindergarten students that would start in September, they start in September. We've once again distributed it across the district as best we can. I'm sure, as all of you know, a lot of our population is really in the northern part of the district. So there are more opportunities in the north than there would be in the south or the east. This one's a bit of a catch-22, if you will, because we do have increased interest from parents and students. However, we have the challenge and consideration of not enough staff having applied who are qualified to teach these classes. So that's one of the things that is a bit of a funnel or a barrier or a challenge. And you may be hearing from some disgruntled parents because they will say, well, this program was canceled. At this point, if a program was canceled, it was because we do not have qualified teachers to teach the classes. At secondary, 2 sites again, LSS and Mountain, and face-to-face classes this year. So return back to pre-pandemic in terms of the learning opportunities. And the vulnerable youth programs are continuing at, just just off the top of my head, there's probably at least half a dozen schools that offer these. And these are, again, to increase engagement for those vulnerable students as they transition from a middle school into a secondary school, or transition into a middle school, or are currently in a middle school. So it's meant to promote the continuous learning for students. And these programs are designed to promote the relationships with the teachers who will be supporting those students into the fall. Some of them will have been supporting the students this school year and will continue on. And then the dates here, July 11th to 29th is the elementary and middle school program, as well as our skill builders at 8 and 9, as well as ELL non-credit. And at secondary, July 4th to August 5th. That's the report.
Thank you very much, and yeah, we appreciate it.
Charlie, I said it was going to be short.
Okay, I'll open it up for questions. Let me just get this on the table first. So I need a mover and a seconder. The Board of Education receives the report on summer session 2022 for information. Go ahead, Marnie Wilson, and do I have a seconder? Charlie Fox. Thank you. And do you have questions, Marnie? Go ahead, and David, and go ahead. Go ahead, Marnie.
Great presentation. I love short and to the point there. That was good. We're all getting pretty sleepy, I think, tonight. So yeah, just your concern about summer session, the full credit, the 5-week course is getting full up. Do we have any sort of preference that we give, say, like if a student needs a remedial course, or if that's something that, you know, they're obviously going to be needing for going into grade 12, or something that's, you know, more pressing than, say, somebody in middle school or elementary school that just wants to take something for, you know, sort of upgrading or of interest to them. So do we have any way that we prioritize, or how does that work if we're short on teachers?
If I understand the question correctly, beyond prioritizing in terms of SD 35, township, and then outside of district, the skill builder courses, those aren't as enrolled as, let's say, the real high enrollment ones are like the physics 11, I believe, was the first one that filled up. Do we have an opportunity to prioritize? We will work with the admin who feel there are these exceptional circumstances that a student, that is, I guess as an example, if a student needed this course in order to be done school August 5th, we would probably be making that happen. But it's case by case. I can't answer it specifically. And it's just, we're monitoring enrollments. And one of the things that we monitor with is the staff to staff those classes. So I don't know if I've quite hit your question.
That's good, thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Okay, sorry, go ahead, Mr.
Great presentation. I'll try it again. There we go. Great presentation. Thank you. I think you said 1750 was it elementary and 850 secondary. So we're at whatever 2600. What back to the enrollment numbers? What is, and given the teacher or the educator constraints? Oh, maybe I got it wrong. 800. Well, yeah, plus or minus. What is, given the numbers that you have for educators, what can you, that's already pre-registered, right? How many more can you fill? And then when does the window cut off for registering?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, registration does close. I believe it's June 15th for elementary, middle, and June 22nd for secondary. I think you've probably heard these same concerns for a number of years. The challenge in terms of staffing right now for teacher staffing is the trades. We had three classes, one qualified applicant. We did a call for more teachers, no applicants. Some of the principals and vice principals at their sites asked staff, no more interest. So that's that one. Math and science continues to be I guess the over demand and under supply. So in terms of, it really depends. I don't foresee challenges in the humanities. However, math and science are sort of our constraints. Yep.
Just for clarity, so, sorry.
I'm not noticing anything.
Just for clarity, the numbers that you would expect, given the numbers of educators that we have available, obviously you might have to change some programs, but are we looking at around 3,000 roughly, or like, because here that's about 2,600 give or take?
Yeah, I would say so. It really depends what students are wanting to take. So it's hard to give you a direct answer to that.
And final comment over here. I know that Suzanne Trustee Perot, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Ross. Thank you, Sam, for your presentation. I'm interested in the conversation around trades. When we don't have educators available to us, are we posting outside the district as well when that occurs to ensure that we're stimulating that area of education for our students, or is it going internal only? If nobody shows up, then we shut it down?
I feel like this would be an appropriate one to defer to HR. I can give you a guess. In terms of the collective agreement, I don't know that there are provisions for that, but it's.
To attract somebody outside the district, they're not our employee. So if we were to do that, we'd have to hire them, which means they likely affect if they're working in a different district, their employment status there potentially. So we haven't tended to do that. We tend to go internal. The struggle in the last few years is that there's been a big push and a need very legitimately to expand our programs. So trades, for instance, years ago, we didn't used to offer those programs. Now that we do, those programs are highly specialized and it just makes it difficult to staff. Every year we struggle, right, Sam, up to the last minute, even for math science, but every year we seem to manage to find the people. But to be honest, with some of the things like trades, that might be even harder. So we don't tend to advertise outside the district because the process would be quite different to bring someone in. We just haven't gone there at this point.
Suzanne, before you follow up, could I also add, in the past, we've run 3 programs and we've had a consistent, the same 3 teachers. And there just wasn't that interest, and we don't find that out until the postings go out, which is usually right around the end of spring break. Before Easter, we had all the list of names. So that's sort of the timeline. This year is a bit of a anomalous year in that the applicants were lower in particular in this course.
Big voice. There we go. I don't have to. I think this question is actually going to go to our superintendent. When we see these experiences occurring where we're not having opportunity to attract students into the trades program due to lack of staff for the summer, could this or has this affected our trades program, like our youth train and trades program overall?
Currently, our trades programs are actually pretty well prescribed at the secondary level. Our district programs are well prescribed as well but obviously this is something that we want to continue to explore because it is an opportunity for families to have their students try something different. or ignite a passion or support their passion. And so certainly this is a conversation we'll carry on further, and appreciate you bringing that up.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more questions, so I'll call the question. The Board of Education receives a report on summer session 2022. Okay, all those in favor? And it's carried unanimously. Great. And now we're on to trustee comments. So why don't we just start with trustee Coburn? I usually save you for last, but why don't we start? We've been using you quite regularly.
All right, let's go. Thank you for coming, everyone. I've written my comments out. So every child deserves to and has the right to be safe in schools. Tonight, we know in our hearts that this has not always been the case, and it still isn't. My heart goes out to all of the families impacted by the unspeakable violence unleashed in Texas today. And also my heart goes out to Cheryl Gabriel and to her family for the loss of 2 children, 2 aunties, to residential schools, and to thousands of other children who never came home. My heart goes out for those who did come home and had to cope with what was done to them at the hands of those who were entrusted with their care. The impacts of residential schools on First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people has resulted in unspeakable traumas. Residential schools systematically undermined Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit cultures across Canada, disrupting families for generations, severing ties through which Indigenous culture is taught and sustained, and contributes to a loss of language, culture, family, economic security, and a sense of identity, which leads to all of the horrible realities that exist for so many of our First Nation, Métis, and Inuit cultures. Many people say they don't know what their role is in reconciliation. And to those people, I say, if you don't know what your role is, simply be an ally. Pick an issue and advocate, educate, and participate. For me, the issue that's closest to my heart is violence against women and the LGBTQIA2S+ community. And it's why I wear my earrings. These earrings, they're beautiful red dresses. These were made by Jean Dan, and she's an elder. On May the 5th, we walk for murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, because Indigenous women and girls are 12 times more likely to be murdered and missing than any other woman in Canada. Advocate and get political. I like to get political, and I'm going to finish by getting really political. The best hope we have is our children in public education, and sadly, we are in rough shape. We've talked tonight about the financial realities facing schools, and last week we sat in a committee meeting, and we asked our staff, what can we do? And the staff says, advocate. Advocate, use all your channels to advocate. So this is one channel I have. And I will have failed in my role as a trustee if I do not publicly speak out against a $789 million museum. Potentially the most expensive museum in Canadian history in the midst of a toxic drug crisis, a crisis in healthcare, hospitals, nurses, ambulances, flood recovery, Linton rebuild, with inflation at its highest in 31 years, and on the precipice of a crisis in public education because of COVID and how brutal it has been on our staff and our families. The very last thing this province needs is a $789 million museum. I urge you all to email or call your MLA and voice to them the inappropriateness of the timing of this announcement, and express that there is something extremely tone deaf about a government that thinks the best thing to do in hyperinflation is to raise minimum wage 40 cents from $15.20 to $15.65 and build a $789 million museum. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you have a great night and take care.
Caught me off guard, and I thought we were moving around the table. Sorry, keeping me on my toes. Well, firstly, thank you to our partner groups and our guests and our support staff and administrative staff staying with us so late. Really appreciate you holding space with us. I just want to acknowledge that I was at the Aboriginal Achievement Awards this last week. It was really phenomenal. And one of the things I wanted to highlight that I took away is I had the privilege of sitting in a very unique spot, and it was at the front, by the stage. And what was wonderful about it was not necessarily because I got to sit there, but it was because I got to listen to the students chatter on the sideline. And it was so profound. And listening to their anxieties and their excitement all at the same time, and then witnessing the deep connection to their Aboriginal support workers on stage as they called them up by name, shook their hand, and hugged them. It was profound because there was a clear connection with our workers, with our students. And it was such a powerful testament of that conversation I spoke to earlier regarding hope floats. You saw that opportunity be ignited by that pathway that was created for them to cross the stage and connect with their Aboriginal support workers. And I got to hear a really profound statement that I carried off to one of our old principals, who's now an assistant superintendent, and if I may share it. This one youth was standing on the sidelines, and they're all super busy and excited, and this one young person is like, he saw Mr. Moino go onto the stage, and this kiddo was like, that's my principal. He's here. He's here with me tonight. And I thought, how profound is that? And I wanted to share that tonight. Thank you for blessing me to share that, because as educators, this is what you guys do. This is what our program is doing. It's igniting life into kids, and it's powerful. And to know that you guys are the tools that are changing generations literally is so profound. And I was so humbled to witness it, and I wanted to share that tonight with each of you. Because it's such important work that's going on in our district, and it does need to be celebrated and announced. I also just want to say, in terms of using my political voice, thank you, Trustee Colburn, there's an naloxone training, overdose crisis event going on, not an event, Q&A and gathering on May 26th at the church, the United Churches of Langley. There's an Eventbrite link in social media. I would encourage you, even if you've done it already, to go again, because we need to have this information. We need to understand what to do. We need to understand how to respond. 3 weeks ago, I had a situation where I stumbled across an individual who overdosed, and none of us had a naloxone kit. And I worked on him for 7 minutes and resuscitated him. It took 7 minutes. Changed my life, changed his life. I will never forget the thump underneath my hand, him coming back. We need to understand this is a paramount conversation. This is a free event, and I want to encourage you to go. It's only going to take your time and your heart and compassion to walk in the face of this conversation. Say, we see you, we hear you, we are with you. So again, that's on May 26th at the United Church of Langley. There's an Eventbrite link in social media, and I do want to encourage our listeners and each of you to attend if you can. Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Tony Ward, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, I'd like to thank all the partners and everybody who's watching tonight. Lots has been said. So just something that stuck with me tonight from that little aphorism from Ida's presentation on Langley Youth Engagement, which is appropriate for tonight. Nothing for them without them. So I thought that's quite a simple. Sometimes sayings are very simple, but they're also very meaningful. So anyhow, thank you.
Bonnie Wilson, please.
Great. In the interest of time, as I feel like I've spoke a lot tonight, I'm just going to say thank you all for coming and have a great evening.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And over to David Talk, please.
Thank you, Chair. At this time, I know I've mentioned it before, but I just really, Trustee Coburn has mentioned this previously, but I just really appreciate our employees. We heard it mentioned over 3,500 people that every day are reaching out and making the connections necessary to be a difference maker. Soon, well, this Friday, I believe we have athletic evening, and then there's retirement where we honor those people that have made a difference in our district year after year. And, you know, the numbers, some of them, they have up to 40 years of service to our district. And it hasn't been easy the last 2 years, especially. But, you know, you have made a difference. And, you know, and we have groups and we talk about that vital thing, as other trustees have mentioned, is connection. So my challenge tonight is for the adults here, make connections with youth. They're not scary. They're sometimes scared. Thank you.
And our youngest trustee?
Oh, either that or you left the best to second last. Anyway, thank you very much to our staff who are sitting here and to our partner groups and the audience. And I'm not going to go on about the finances. It's devastating right now, and I think that we have a lot of conversation at this table amongst the trustees. We've had conversations. We're going to have more about that. But I want to end up on a high note because, you know, I've had the opportunity in the last 2-3 weeks to experience what's happening in our schools, and it's opening up. I went to the Aboriginal Achievement Awards with my colleagues, and there was a lot of energy, a lot of positives, a lot of joy there, and it really made my heart feel warm. I did a speech contest. I haven't done a speech contest for a couple of years. You know, they always like to bring the old guys back, and you got to sit there with your little. But it was great hearing grade 2s through grade 5s doing their speeches. It was wonderful. They were very energetic and whatnot. And we always thought that, you know, some of those pieces of the puzzle might be missed over COVID because we kept everybody apart, but they were really coming together. And I went to see Mamma Mia in the rain. Now that was an experience, but I don't know if any others of you saw Mamma Mia up at Walnut Grove Secondary. Excellent student presentation. Poured rain, sat under a tent, the tree branches going down. My head was going around the tree branches as it went on, but it was an excellent presentation. And you know, those, as cold as it was, as rainy as it was, it didn't bother those students at all. They were just so involved in it night after night after night. I don't think they had a non-rain event, did they? I don't think so, but they were there. And today I had the opportunity to go and open the community garden at Glenwood Elementary School. And they partnered the Rotary Club of Langley Central, my old Rotary Club, and the Satellite Club supported this. They've created an outdoor classroom, and they've created planter boxes for each division in the school. And the two grade 7 divisions have 2 boxes each. There were students there, packed there, principal and the partner groups, and it was really a pleasure to see. Kids are enthusiastic. I love the energy that's coming around and being a part of our education system here in Langley, and that's what drives us more and more each day to do what we do. So thank you.
And I'll keep my comments quick as well, but I just want to encourage everyone to come out on Tuesday, 10 o'clock, just out in the front. 9:45, starts right at 10, and we'll have a wonderful ceremony remembering those that didn't come home. On to the balance of our meeting, which is basically question period. I'll just read this out. Question period is provided at board meetings. The purpose is to ensure that those present at the audience, have an opportunity to obtain clarification concerning business conducted during the meeting. Priority will be given to responding to 1 question per person before considering further questions from any individual. The following will help the public develop questions for question period at board meeting that is keeping with the goal of a respectful and focused meeting. Question number 1. Need to be directed to the chair, not to staff. Need to be related directly to the topic on the agenda. 3, need to be succinct, focused, not be a statement. 4, may not be asked that are related to personnel or directed to an individual trustee. 5, may not be asked that are related to contract negotiations. And 6, the questioner shall provide their name so that we be reflected in the minutes. All of the above are directions provided for in policy number 7, board operations. The chair may answer, may defer to staff, or indicate a question may not be in keeping with the above guidelines. The board appreciates the public interest and wants to ensure a professional meeting is conducted with question period focused on providing guests with the clarification they seek. Trustees also welcome questions from members of the public apart from question period. Their contact information is available on the school district website. I will now call for questions from the audience. Is there any questions? Seeing none, I guess we're coming to an end of our meeting. I'd like to call for an adjournment, please. Moved by Trustee Coburn, seconded by Tony Ward. And all those in favor? All those in favor? And it's carried unanimously at 10 o'clock. 9:55. 9:55? Oh, 9:57. Okay.